I'm Abigail, 34, and 3 nights ago I stood alone in a hotel lobby, my suitcase heavy at my feet, watching my husband Nathan stride through the glass doors without a glance back. We'd come to celebrate our 5th anniversary, a chance to mend our fraying bond. His goodbye was cold, his smirk cutting as if I were a guest he could dismiss. He didn't know my secret I owned this hotel, and everyone in the chain inherited from my Aunt Helen. When I told the front desk to book me the owner's suite, his world was about to unravel. Have you ever held a truth that shifted everything? Share where you're watching from below, and please like and subscribe to hear how it played out. The hotel room smelled of lavender and crisp linens, but it couldn't mask the chill that settled in my chest after Nathan walked out. I sat on the edge of the bed, my fingers tracing the hem of my sweater, replaying his parting words. "You'll figure it out, Abigail." His voice had been sharp, dismissive, as if I were a problem he could leave behind. We'd arrived 2 days ago, our 5th anniversary trip, and I'd hoped it would rekindle the spark we'd lost. But Nathan had been distant, his eyes glued to his phone, his replies clipped. I pulled out a small journal from my bag, a gift from my Aunt Helen, who'd raised me after my parents passed in a car accident when I was 12. She'd built this hotel chain from nothing, her grit etched into every property from the polished marble lobbies to the quiet staff rooms. I flipped to a blank page, my pen hovering, but no words came. Helen's voice rang in my head, "Never let anyone make you small, Abigail." I'd kept my ownership of the chain quiet. Even from Nathan, an instinct I couldn't explain, but trusted, born from Helen's lessons in caution after she'd navigated her own betrayals in business. The first night here, we'd walk the boardwalk, the salty ocean air sharp against my skin. Nathan held my hand, but his grip was loose, his attention elsewhere, checking his phone when he thought I wasn't looking. I'd brushed it off, telling myself it was just work stress, his consulting firm always demanding more. But doubt had started to creep in, a whisper I tried to silence with memories of our early days when his laughter felt like home. Yesterday, he'd been late for our dinner reservation, blaming a work call. I'd waited alone at the candlelit table, the waiter's pitying glance burning my cheeks. The restaurant was softly lit, the clink of silverware and murmur of other couples a stark contrast to my solitude. When Nathan finally showed, he barely ate, muttering about a deal falling through. I asked what was wrong, my voice soft, hoping to reach him. "Just business," he said, brushing me off his fingers, tapping the table like he couldn't wait to leave. I swallowed my hurt, smiling, for the sake of the evening, but doubt crept in, heavy and cold, settling in my bones like damp weather. This morning I'd woken to find him packing his suitcase, half-zipped on the floor, shirts folded with a precision that felt out of place. He said he had to go an emergency meeting and I could stay or follow. I stood frozen, my heart sinking as he grabbed his coat, the leather creaking in his hands. When I asked why he was acting like this, he smirked, saying I'd be fine, that I always was. Then he left the door clicking shut, leaving me with nothing but silence and questions. I stood there, the room's high ceiling looming, the weight of his dismissal pressing down. I walked to the window, the city lights below blurring through my unshed tears. The skyline was jagged, a mix of steel and glass, each building a story of ambition like Helen's. My phone buzzed, a text from Sarah, the hotel manager, asking if I needed anything. She didn't know Nathan had left, but her kindness stung, a reminder of the life I'd built here separate from him. Sarah had worked under Helen, her loyalty unwavering, and I pictured her warm brown eyes always scanning the lobby for trouble. I typed a quick reply saying I was okay, but my hands shook. Something was wrong, deeper than a missed dinner or a rushed exit. I clutched Helen's journal, its leather cover worn from years of her touch, my breath uneven. I walked to the balcony, the cool air sharp against my face, and stared at the ocean in the distance, its waves a steady rhythm I couldn't match. I wasn't ready to face it, but the truth was there, lurking like a storm on the horizon. I left the hotel room, needing air, needing space to think. The lobby was bustling, guests checking in with rolling suitcases, their chatter a stark contrast to the storm inside me. The chandeliers gleamed above, casting golden light on the marble floor, a touch of Helen's elegance. I stepped outside the city's hum wrapping around me and walked to a nearby park, my sneakers crunching on gravel paths lined with sycamores. I sat on a bench, Helen's journal still in my bag. Its weight a quiet reminder of who I was beyond Nathan's shadow. His abrupt departure replayed in my mind, his smirk cutting deeper each time like a blade I hadn't seen coming. I wanted to call him to demand answers, but my pride held me back, a stubborn knot in my chest. Instead, I texted my cousin Rachel, who'd always been my rock blunt and fiercely loyal, her hair always tied back in a messy bun from her days as a paralegal. She was out of town but promised to dig into Nathan's recent behavior, her texts quick and sharp. She'd heard rumors about his business deals, shaky investments. He never mentioned to me, whispered at family gatherings I'd missed. My chest tightened, the air in the park suddenly too thin. I'd thought our marriage was a partnership built on late-night talks and shared dreams, but now I wondered what else he'd hidden. Rachel urged me to check his laptop left behind in the room. The idea felt invasive, like crossing a line I couldn't uncross, but her words stuck. "You deserve the truth, Abigail." Back at the hotel, I hesitated outside our suite, the keycard heavy in my hand, its plastic cool against my palm. The room was quiet. Nathan's suitcase gone, but his laptop sat on the desk screen, dark, a sleek black thing that felt like a stranger. My heart raced as I opened it, the login password, one he'd shared months ago during a rare moment of openness. I scrolled through his emails, my breath shallow, the screen's glow harsh in the dim room. I found a thread with someone named Veronica, the messages cryptic, "Finalize the transfer soon, and she doesn't need to know yet." My stomach dropped, a cold wave washing over me. Was this about me? The hotel. Something else. I closed the laptop, my hands trembling, unable to read more, the words like shards of glass in my mind. I called Sarah, asking her to check if anyone had inquired about the property recently. She paused, her voice hesitant through the phone, then mentioned a woman who'd called yesterday asking about ownership records, claiming to be an investor. Sarah hadn't thought much of it, but the timing felt too close to Nathan's exit, like a puzzle piece snapping into place. I thanked her, my voice steady, despite the panic rising inside, and hung up the phone, heavy in my hand. I paced the room, the plush carpet muffling my steps, my mind racing with questions I wasn't ready to face. The suite's walls, painted in Helen's favorite soft blue, felt too close, like they were holding my secrets. That evening I sat by the window, the city lights now a distant glow, the ocean beyond a dark expanse. Rachel called, her voice tense through the crackle of a bad signal. She'd spoken to a friend who worked with Nathan, a guy named Leo, who'd seen him at a conference. He'd been meeting with investors, promising big returns, using the hotel's reputation as leverage, tossing around figures that didn't add up. My blood ran cold, my fingers tightening around Helen's journal. Had he known I owned the chain? Had he married me for it? The thought twisted like a blade, sharp and deep, cutting through the life I'd thought we shared. I stood my shadow long against the wall and looked at the laptop, its silence louder than any answer. The truth was closing in a tide I couldn't outrun, and I wasn't sure I could face what it would reveal. The hotel suite felt too big, the silence pressing against me as I stood by the window. Helen's journal now open on the desk, its pages creased from my restless fingers. Nathan's emails with Veronica burned in my mind, their secrecy a betrayal I couldn't unsee, each word a splinter under my skin. I wanted to call him to hear him explain, but the thought of his voice, smooth and evasive, made my skin crawl. I needed proof, something solid to confront the doubt eating me alive, but my hands trembled at the thought of digging deeper. I met Sarah in the hotel's staff lounge, a cramped room smelling of coffee and cleaning supplies, the hum of a vending machine in the corner. I asked about the woman who'd called about ownership, keeping my tone calm, though my pulse raced. Sarah frowned, pulling up a log on her tablet, her fingers quick on the screen. The caller, Veronica, had asked specific questions about the chain's financials, claiming she was scouting for investors, her voice sharp and insistent. My heart sank, a cold weight settling in my chest. I asked Sarah to forward any more inquiries to me directly. My voice steady, but my hands clenched in my pockets. She nodded, her eyes soft with concern, sensing something was wrong, her loyalty a quiet echo of Helen's trust in her. Back in the suite, I opened Nathan's laptop again, my pulse racing, the room's silence heavier now. I found a folder labeled Proposals buried in his files. Its name innocuous, but chilling. Inside were documents outlining a deal to sell shares in a hotel chain, my chain. The numbers were staggering, far beyond anything Nathan could access without me, with projections that leaned on my property's value. My name wasn't mentioned, but the implication was clear. He was leveraging my ownership without my knowledge. My chest tightened, a mix of rage and grief swelling inside me. I'd shared my life with him, cooked dinners in our small apartment, planned a future, but he'd seen me as a stepping stone. I called Rachel, my voice shaking as I told her about the documents, reading out clauses that twisted my stomach. She was quiet for a moment, her silence heavy through the phone, then said she'd found Veronica's LinkedIn. She was a financial consultant with a history of shady deals linked to Nathan's firm through past projects. Rachel's voice hardened, her words clipped. He's been planning this, Abigail. Probably for months, maybe longer. I hung up, my breath shallow, the room closing and the soft blue walls now suffocating. I thought of our anniversary dinner, his distracted glances, his rushed exit, the way he'd barely looked at me. Had he ever loved me? Or was I just a key to his ambitions? I paced the suite, the plush carpet muffling my steps, my mind a storm of questions. I stopped at the mirror, my reflection pale but sharp, my eyes red from holding back tears. Helen's words echoed, "Ever let anyone make you small?" I'd trusted Nathan, built a life with him, planned vacations and quiet nights, and now it was crumbling, each revelation a crack in the foundation. I wanted to scream, to tear apart his lies, but I was frozen, caught between hurt and the dawning truth. I sank onto the bed, the documents still open on the laptop, their words a weight I couldn't shake. I thought of Helen's office where I'd played as a child, her desk piled with contracts she'd fought to secure. I'd let her down, let Nathan in too deep, and the shame of it burned, pulling me deeper into a pain I wasn't ready to face. I sat on the bed, the laptop's glow casting shadows across the room, Nathan's documents staring back at me like a confession. My hands shook as I closed the screen, unable to read more, the words like a brand on my heart. The weight of his betrayal settled deeper, a cold ache spreading through me, numbing my fingers. I thought of our early days, his hand in mine at a summer fair. The smell of cotton candy and his promises of a shared future, his eyes bright with what I'd thought was love. Had it all been a performance? I wanted to believe there was something real, but the evidence was suffocating, each discovery a fresh wound that bled into the next. I walked to the hotel's bar, needing to escape the sweet silence, the polished wood counter and dim lighting a temporary shield. The clink of glasses and low hum of conversation felt distant, like I was underwater, my thoughts louder than the chatter. I ordered a glass of wine, my fingers tracing the stem, its cool glass grounding me as I overheard a couple laughing nearby, their hands intertwined. Their ease twisted something inside me, a reminder of what I'd thought Nathan and I had our evenings planning trips or joking over takeout. My phone buzzed. Rachel again, her voice tight with urgency through the static. She'd spoken to a former colleague of Nathan's named Marcus, a quiet guy who'd worked on his team. He said Nathan had bragged about landing a big investor, hinting at a hotel deal that would set him up for life, his voice smug at a company retreat. Marcus didn't know details, but he'd heard Nathan mention a silent partner who owned the assets. Me. My throat closed up, the wine's sharp tang forgotten. I thanked Rachel, my voice barely audible, and set the phone down, the bar's warmth fading. The wine sat untouched, its surface still, as my thoughts churned a storm of memories and realizations. Nathan hadn't just lied. He'd built a plan around me, using my inheritance as his ladder, every smile a calculated step. I remembered our late-night talks, how he'd ask about my work, my family. His curiosity always gentle, probing, his hand brushing mine. I'd thought he cared, that he saw me. Now I saw it for what it was, reconnaissance, a map to my assets. My chest burned, anger mixing with a grief so heavy it pinned me to the bar stool, the couple's laughter a distant echo. I returned to the suite, the city lights outside, now harsh, unforgiving, cutting through the dark like accusations. I found a voicemail from Nathan, his voice smooth, almost pleading. Abigail, I had to leave for work. Let's talk when I'm back. I love you. The words felt like a mockery, each one a lie I'd once believed wrapped in his easy charm. I deleted it, my hands steady, but my heart racing, the deletion a small act of defiance. At the desk, I opened Helen's journal, her bold handwriting, a lifeline, her words scrawled in black ink. You are enough, Abigail. Trust that. She'd faced her own battles, built this chain against all odds, her resilience a fire I'd forgotten I carried. I traced her words, my eyes blurring, feeling like I'd failed her by letting Nathan in, by believing his love was real. The pain was a tide pulling me under, and I stood there alone in the suite. The truth of his deception, a weight I could barely carry, my reflection in the window, a stranger staring back. The suite was too quiet. The city lights outside cutting through the dark like accusations. I stood frozen, Helen's journal open on the desk, Nathan's voicemail deleted but his voice still echoing in my head, a ghost I couldn't shake. I couldn't sit still, my hands restless, so I walked to the hotel's front desk, needing something to anchor me. The lobby's soft hum, a faint comfort. Sarah was there, her smile fading when she saw my face, her hands pausing on the keyboard. I asked if Veronica had called again, my voice low to hide the tremor. She nodded, saying the woman had stopped by in person an hour ago, asking to meet the owner, her tone sharp and insistent. My heart stopped, a cold jolt running through me. She didn't know I was the owner, but Nathan did, and the realization hit like a wave. I asked Sarah to describe her, my words careful, measured. Tall, polished red lipstick. She said, her voice hesitant, her eyes searching mine for answers I couldn't give. She handed me a business card. Veronica had left her name in bold print, a financial consultant title underneath the card's glossy finish, cold in my hand. My hands shook as I tucked it into my pocket, the pieces falling into place, each one sharper than the last. Nathan's emails, his sudden exit. Veronica's probing, it was all connected, a web I'd been caught in without knowing. I thanked Sarah, my voice tight, and headed to the elevator, my mind racing the card a burning weight in my jacket. Back in the suite, I found a new email in Nathan's inbox, one he hadn't deleted, sent this morning from Veronica. The buyer's ready, but we need her signature. Meet me at the hotel tonight. My breath caught a wave of nausea hitting me, the words blurring on the screen. They were planning to sell my hotels, my legacy, right under my nose, using my trust as their leverage. I pictured Nathan's smirk as he left, his casual dismissal, and realized he'd never planned to come back, his words a lie to keep me quiet. My knees felt weak, but I gripped the desk, Helen's journal under my fingers, her strength, a faint pulse in my veins, her handwriting a tether to who I was. I called Rachel, my voice trembling as I read her the email, my words stumbling over the betrayal. She cursed, her anger sharp through the phone, her voice a lifeline. That's why he bailed, she said. He's setting you up, Abigail. I hung up my chest, heaving, the betrayal so raw it burned a fire I couldn't douse. I saw our wedding day, his vows, his hand in mine, the way he'd looked at me under the soft lights, all lies woven into a story I'd believed. I wanted to scream, to confront him, but he wasn't here, and Veronica was, her presence a shadow in the lobby below. I stood, my hands clenched, the card in my pocket, a weight I couldn't ignore. The truth was crashing down, and I was caught in its undertow, not ready to fight, but unable to look away, my heart pounding with a pain that felt endless. I clutched Veronica's business card, its edges digging into my palm as I stood in the suite, the city's glow outside, now a harsh glare, each light a reminder of what was at stake. My phone buzzed, Rachel again, her voice urgent, her words rushed through the line. She'd found a contract in Nathan's cloud drive, one he'd shared with Veronica, outlining a sale of hotel assets to an offshore buyer, a deal worth millions. My name wasn't on it, but the properties listed were mine, every detail exact down to the square footage of this very hotel, its lobby's marble floors, its rooftop garden. My vision blurred, rage and grief colliding, a storm inside me. He'd planned this before we even arrived, using our anniversary as a cover, a cruel disguise for his ambition. I sank into a chair, the room's silence deafening, the leather creaking under my weight. I saw our first trip together. Nathan's hand on my back as we toured a vineyard, his laughter warm and easy, the taste of Merlot lingering on my tongue. Was any of it real? The contract's date was months old before our last big fight, before he'd promised to change to prioritize us. He'd been plotting with Veronica, counting on my trust to blind me, each smile a calculated move. My stomach churned, the betrayal so deep it felt like drowning the air too thick to breathe. I opened the door to leave, needing air, when Sarah called up from the front desk, her voice tense. Veronica was back in the lobby with a man in a suit asking for Nathan, their voices low but urgent. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I told Sarah to stall them, my voice shaking, barely holding together. I stood frozen, picturing Veronica's polished smile, her red lipstick stark against her pale skin, her confidence that I was clueless. She didn't know I'd seen the contract, that I knew everything. I wanted to march downstairs, to scream at her, to shatter her smugness, but my legs wouldn't move, rooted by fear and fury. Helen's journal lay open, her handwriting a faint anchor, but it wasn't enough to pull me out. The phone rang again, Nathan this time. His voice calm, too calm, a practiced tone that made my skin crawl. He asked why I hadn't checked out yet, saying he'd be back soon, that we could talk, his words dripping with false care. "I love you," he said, and the lie was a blade cutting through the last threads of hope. I couldn't speak, my throat tight with fury, and hurt, the phone shaking in my hand. I hung up my fingers, trembling, the contract's words burning in my mind. My hotels, my legacy sold out from under me. I stood there alone in the suite, the weight of his deception crushing me. The world I'd built with him shattered, leaving nothing but a raw, aching void, my reflection in the glass, a ghost of the woman I'd been. The suite felt like a trap, Nathan's voice from the phone still ringing in my ears. His fake concern, a final insult that twisted in my gut. I stood there, Veronica's business card crumpled in my fist, the contract's words searing my mind, each line a betrayal etched in black and white. I couldn't let him take everything, not Helen's legacy, not my dignity, not the life she'd built and left to me. Something snapped inside me, not loud or dramatic, but quiet, like a lock clicking into place, a resolve born from the ashes of my trust. I thought of Helen, her calloused hands signing deeds, her voice firm in my memory, "Never let anyone make you small, Abigail." I wasn't small. Not anymore. I called Rachel, my voice low but steady, cutting through the static of my fear, and told her to send me every document she'd found. She emailed the contract and a string of messages between Nathan and Veronica, her tone smug as she wrote about sealing the deal, her words cold and calculated. I forwarded them to Margaret, the chain's general counsel, a woman Helen trusted with every legal detail, her sharp mind a fortress against fraud. Margaret picked up on the first ring, her voice sharp but warm, a steady anchor. "Bring everything to my office," she said, her tone leaving no room for doubt. "We'll stop this now." I gathered the laptop, the business card, and Helen's journal, my hands steady despite the ache in my chest, each item a piece of my fight. I walked to the lobby, my steps deliberate, the marble floor cool under my shoes. I found Sarah behind the desk, her hands busy with a guest's request. I asked her to pull security footage from Veronica's visit, my tone calm but firm, my heart pounding beneath the surface. She nodded, her eyes wide, sensing the weight of my words, and promised to have it ready within the hour. I thanked her, feeling a flicker of control return, like a tide shifting in my favor. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was moving forward, each step a claim on my own power. Helen's strength was in me, her legacy a shield I'd almost forgotten I held its weight, now grounding me. Margaret's office was across town, a modest space lined with files and photos of Helen at hotel openings, her smile fierce in every frame. I laid out the evidence, the contract, the emails, Veronica's card, each piece a thread in Nathan's web. Margaret's eyes narrowed as she read, her pen tapping the desk, a rhythm that steadied my nerves. "This is fraud, Abigail," she said, her voice cutting through the fog of my pain. "Nathan's overplayed his hand, and we'll make sure he knows it." She outlined a plan, a cease and desist letter, a fraud claim, and a freeze on any sale attempts, her words precise like steps in a dance she'd mastered. I nodded, my heart pounding, but my resolve solid, my thoughts flashing to Nathan's smirk, his casual exit, and the fire it had kindled inside me. Not rage, but purpose. A quiet flame that refused to die. I drove back to the hotel, the city blurring past Margaret's words echoing, "We'll protect what's yours." I stopped by the front desk where Sarah handed me a USB drive with the footage, her hand lingering, her voice soft. "You're stronger than you know," she said, her eyes meeting mine, reflecting Helen's belief in me. I felt a surge of clarity, a sense of who I was beyond the wife Nathan had left behind. I wasn't just fighting for the hotels. I was fighting for myself, for the woman Helen raised me to be, her lessons woven into every choice I made now. I slipped the USB into my pocket next to Helen's journal, its leather warm from my touch. I walked to the elevator, my steps firm, the lobby's hum fading behind me, my heart steady with a resolve that felt like coming home. Back at the hotel, I sat in the owner's suite, the USB drive from Sarah resting on the table, its weight heavier than it should have been, a small black square holding the truth of Nathan's lies. I'd moved here from our old room, needing a space that was mine, not tainted by his betrayal, the suite's wide windows framing the city's skyline like a canvas of possibility. The quiet was a balm, its stillness letting me breathe. I opened Helen's journal, finding a note she'd written years ago in her sharp, slanted script, "Own your power, Abigail. It's yours, not theirs." My fingers traced her words, her strength seeping into me, a quiet fire that warmed the cold edges of my heart. I called Rachel, asking her to meet me at the hotel, needing her sharp mind and fiercer heart. She arrived, her eyes fierce, her boots clicking on the marble floor, carrying a folder of printed emails she'd pulled from Nathan's account, her hands steady despite her anger. We sat on the suite's leather couch, the papers spread out, each one a piece of his betrayal, stark and undeniable. I pointed to a line in one email where Veronica mentioned a meeting with the buyer tonight at the hotel's bar, her words cold and precise. "We close this, and we're set. I'm going to confront her," I said, my voice steady, the words a vow to myself. Rachel hesitated, her brow furrowing, then nodded, promising to stay close, her loyalty a tether I clung to. Her trust in me felt like a lifeline grounding my resolve, a reminder that I wasn't alone. I walked to the lobby where Sarah had saved the footage, her office tucked behind the desk, a small space cluttered with schedules and coffee mugs. I watched it on her computer, the grainy images showing Veronica and a man in a suit, their heads bent together near the lobby's fountain, her gestures sharp and urgent, his briefcase gleaming under the lights. My heart pounded, but I felt a clarity I hadn't before, like a fog lifting. I asked Sarah to alert me if Veronica returned, and she agreed, her loyalty a quiet echo of Helen's legacy, her nod, a promise I could lean on. I slipped the USB into my bag next to Helen's journal, feeling their combined weight steady me like stones in a riverbed. I drove to the hotel's corporate office, a place I'd rarely visited since inheriting the chain, its glass doors reflecting the city's pulse. The receptionist Clara greeted me with a warm smile, her gray hair pulled back, unaware of the storm I carried. I asked to see the ownership records, my voice calm but firm, the words a shield. Clara pulled the files, her hands quick and sure, and I reviewed them, confirming every property was still in my name, untouched by Nathan's schemes, each deed a testament to Helen's foresight. I thanked her, my hands steady, and left with copies of the deeds. Their paper crisp, each one a shield. Helen had left me her trust, a weight I was ready to carry. Back in the suite, I wrote a letter to Nathan, my pen moving with purpose across the hotel's stationery, the paper smooth under my hand. I told him I knew about the contract, Veronica the buyer, my words sharp, but controlled each sentence a step away from his lies. "I'm not your pawn," I wrote the words. A declaration, not a plea. I sealed it, leaving it with Sarah to deliver, if he showed up, her hands gentle as she took it, her eyes steady with understanding. I stood by the window, the city sprawling below its lights, a map of resilience, and felt a shift inside me. I wasn't just Abigail, the abandoned wife, the woman left in a hotel lobby. I was the woman who owned this chain, who carried Helen's legacy, her strength now mine. I turned from the glass, my gaze steady, my heart no longer trembling but resolute, the weight of my choice. a fire that burned quietly, ready to face the fight I'd chosen. I stood in the owner's suite, the city lights below a quiet hum, my letter to Nathan still with Sarah at the front desk, its words a line I'd drawn in the sand. The weight of my actions confronting Veronica's scheme, securing the deeds, gathering evidence, settled over me like a heavy coat, warm but unyielding. I'd taken a stand, but now I waited, the silence thick with what might come next, the air heavy with anticipation. Margaret called, her voice crisp over the phone, cutting through the morning's calm. The cease and desist letter had been served to Nathan and Veronica, and the fraud claim was filed, the legal wheels turning. The hotels were secure, she said, Helen's trust airtight, but Nathan's lawyer was already pushing back, claiming I'd misled him about my assets, twisting his betrayal into a narrative where I was the deceiver. The accusation stung, a fresh wound, but I held on to Margaret's assurance, her words, a steady hand. I walked to the hotel's rooftop garden, a place Helen loved, its potted herbs and low benches bathed in moonlight, the scent of rosemary sharp in the air. The city sparkled below its lights, softer now, and I sat, my hands tracing the edge of a lavender plant, its texture grounding me. I thought of Nathan reading my letter, his reaction unknown, his face a blank I couldn't read. Would he fight harder? Beg, disappear? The uncertainty pressed against my chest, a quiet ache, but I felt Helen's presence in the garden's stillness, her strength steadying me, her memory a whisper. You're enough. I closed my eyes, the night air cool against my skin, and let her words settle a balm against the storm. Rachel met me there, her face taut with worry, her jacket zipped against the chill. She'd heard from Marcus again, who said Nathan was furious, claiming I'd ruined his deal, his voice sharp at a bar downtown, his words slurred with desperation. He'd been ranting about losing everything Marcus said, his pride unraveling in public. Rachel's voice softened as she touched my arm, saying I'd done the right thing, her warmth a reminder of the family I still had. Her support warmed me, but it couldn't erase the ache of Nathan's lies, the way he'd turned my love into a tool, a means to an end. I knotted my throat tight, unable to speak, the lavender's scent clinging to my fingers. Back in the suite, Sarah texted saying Veronica had called the hotel again, asking for a meeting with the owner. Her voice clipped and demanding. My pulse quickened, a jolt of adrenaline. I told Sarah to say the owner was unavailable, my fingers steady on the phone, my resolve hardening. The audacity of Veronica's persistence, even after the legal notice, made my skin crawl, her red lipstick a vivid image in my mind. I pictured her confidence, her belief that I was still in the dark, and felt a flicker of dread. Had I underestimated her, the rooftops' calm faded, replaced by a cold tension, as if the fight I'd started was coiling tighter, waiting to strike. I sat on the suite's couch, Helen's journal open in my lap, her words a faint anchor in the storm. A note from a hotel staffer slipped under the door, written in neat script, saying a man had been asking about me at the front desk, not Nathan, but someone new. His presence a question mark. My heart thudded, the unknown looming larger, a shadow I couldn't name. I folded the note, my hands cold, the world outside still, but the consequences of my stand were closing in heavy and unyielding like a tide I couldn't hold back. I held the staffer's note, its words blurring as I sat on the suite's couch. Helen's journal still open beside me, its pages a quiet comfort. The man asking about me wasn't Nathan, but the unknown felt heavier like a shadow. I couldn't shake its edges sharp with possibility. I called Sarah, my voice low, asking for a description, my heart pounding beneath my calm. She said he was older, gray suit, carried a briefcase, didn't leave a name, his eyes scanning the lobby like he was searching for something. My stomach twisted, a cold knot forming. Was he Veronica's buyer? Another of Nathan's allies? The fight I'd started was spreading, pulling in strangers, and I felt exposed, my control slipping like sand through my fingers. I walked to the hotel's conference room where I'd asked Clara to meet me, the space small, but lined with photos of Helen's early days, her smile fierce in black and white. Clara had been with the chain since Helen's time, her memory sharp as ever, her hands quick as she sorted papers. I showed her the note, asking if she'd seen the man, my voice steady, but my pulse racing. She frowned, recalling a similar figure lingering in the lobby yesterday, speaking to Veronica. His voice low, his questions about the chain's valuation too, pointed, too precise. My throat tightened, the scope of Nathan's plans sinking in deeper, its edges sharper than I'd imagined, a web that stretched beyond what I'd seen. Rachel texted saying she'd tracked down a contact who knew Veronica's buyer. A man named Gerald. Linked to offshore accounts, his name whispered in financial circles for skirting the law. He'd been spotted with Nathan last week before our trip at a cafe near Nathan's office, their heads bent over papers. The betrayal cut fresh. Nathan's lies, not just personal, it calculated, sprawling, a machine I'd only glimpsed. I thanked Rachel, my fingers cold on the phone, her words a reminder that I'd stirred a hornet's nest, its buzz growing louder. I wanted to call Nathan to hear his voice crack under the weight of my evidence, but I stopped myself knowing it wouldn't heal, the ache wouldn't undo the truth. I visited the hotel's kitchen where staff were prepping for dinner service, the clatter of pans, a grounding hum, the air thick with the scent of garlic and fresh bread. A cook, Teresa, who'd worked under Helen, caught my eye, her apron dusted with flour. She offered me a warm roll, her smile kind but searching her eyes, holding a question she didn't ask. Words spreading, she said softly, about trouble with the ownership, her voice low to avoid the other cooks. I nodded, unable to speak, the weight of their trust pressing down heavy as the dough she kneaded. They saw me as Helen's heir, the woman carrying her legacy, but I felt like a fraud, blindsided by my own husband, my confidence shaken. I returned to the suite, the city dark outside, my reflection faint in the glass, a ghost of the woman I'd been. A new email from Nathan waited. I didn't mean for this, Abigail. Let's meet. I deleted it, my hands steady, but my heart heavy, the words a hollow echo of his charm. The staff's loyalty. Clara's vigilance. Teresa's quiet support, they were anchors, but the fight was far from over, its edges jagged and unseen. I sat staring at the empty screen, the silence swallowing me, my strength tested by the growing shadow of Nathan's world, closing in with a weight I could barely bear, my breath shallow in the quiet. The morning light spilled into the owner's suite, soft and golden, warming the hardwood floor, the air carrying a faint scent of polished wood. I'd been staying here for days now, the hotel my refuge, its familiar hum, a quiet comfort, like a heartbeat I could lean into. I sat at the small dining table, a cup of chamomile tea steaming in my hands, its warmth seeping into my palms, and watched the city wake up outside, the skyline softening in the dawn. Nathan's email, his hollow plea to meet, was gone from my inbox, deleted but not forgotten. Its words a faint sting I refused to dwell on. The fight wasn't over, but I felt a shift like the air after a storm, clearer, lighter, the world opening just enough to let me breathe. I walked the hotel's halls, passing staff, who nodded with quiet respect, their faces familiar now. John at the bell desk, Lila in housekeeping, their smiles small but steady. I'd started checking in with them daily, learning their names, their stories, their quirks. Maria, a housekeeper, with a quick laugh, shared how Helen had paid for her daughter's school books years ago, her voice warm with memory as she folded sheets in the laundry room. Her gratitude, simple and real, settled in me, a reminder of the legacy I carried, a weight I was learning to hold. I smiled, promising to keep the staff lounge stocked with her favorite coffee, and felt a warmth I hadn't in weeks, a flicker of connection that eased the ache. Later, I stopped by the hotel's library, a cozy room Helen had designed with leather chairs and oak shelves, the air heavy with the scent of old books. I pulled out an old guest book, its pages filled with notes from travelers who'd stayed here in Helen's time, their words a tapestry of gratitude. One entry caught my eye, written in her neat script, "Keep the doors open always." I traced the words, my fingers steady, feeling her wisdom guide me, her voice a quiet hum in my mind. I'd been so caught up in Nathan's betrayal, I'd almost forgotten who I was. Abigail, Helen's heir, not just a wife he'd left behind in a cold lobby. I met Rachel for coffee in the hotel's cafe, the clink of cups, a soft backdrop, the morning crowd, a gentle hum of voices. She didn't bring up Nathan, instead asking about my plans for the chain, her eyes bright with curiosity. I told her I wanted to expand the community programs Helen started, maybe offer free stays for struggling families, a way to give back what she'd given me. Her eyes lit up and we brainstormed over napkins, sketching ideas for a mentorship program, her pen quick and sure. For the first time, I felt like I was building something, not just defending it. The act of dreaming forward, a quiet rebellion against Nathan's shadow. I leaned back, the cafe's warmth wrapping around me. My breath slow, my heart finding a quiet rhythm, the weight of the past easing just enough to let me see the future. The cafe's warmth lingered as I walked back to the owner's suite. Rachel's napkins with our scribbled ideas tucked in my pocket, their edges soft from my touch. The hotel hummed around me, its rhythm steady like a heartbeat. I was learning to trust again, each step on the marble floor a quiet affirmation. I sat by the window, the city's evening lights softening into a quiet glow, the ocean beyond a faint shimmer. I thought of Nathan, not with anger but with a strange detachment, like he was a chapter I'd read, and closed his face, a memory I no longer needed. His betrayal had broken me, but it had also shown me what I could carry, what I could build from the pieces. I opened a drawer and found a small keychain, a gift from Helen, shaped like a tiny hotel door, its silver worn from years of her touch. She'd given it to me when I turned 18, her eyes bright with pride, her voice steady. "It's your turn to open doors, Abigail." I held it, its cool metal grounding me, a reminder of the woman she'd raised me to be, fierce and quiet in my own way. I wasn't fighting for Nathan's approval anymore. I was building for myself, for the people who called this chain home, their lives intertwined with Helen's vision. I met Teresa in the kitchen later, where she was kneading dough for tomorrow's bread, the air thick with the scent of yeast and warmth. She shared a story about Helen teaching her to bake, her hands steady. Despite years of loss, her voice soft, as she described shaping loaves under Helen's patient gaze. I listened, rolling dough beside her, the act simple but healing my hands, finding a rhythm in the work. We laughed over a misshapen loaf, its crust uneven but warm, and I felt a piece of myself settle like a stone finding its place in a stream. The hotel wasn't just a business. It was a community, a legacy I was ready to carry forward, my hands stronger for it. As night fell, I walked to the rooftop terrace, the air crisp with the promise of autumn, the city's lights a quiet constellation below. I stood by a small fountain, its trickle soft, and looked out at the skyline. I didn't need Nathan's apologies or Veronica's defeat to move on. I had Helen's keychain, the staff's trust, my own quiet strength earned through every choice I'd made. I slipped the keychain into my pocket, my fingers brushing its edges, and took a slow breath, the sound of the fountain blending with the city's hum. The world was still, and so was I, rooted in a peace I'd fought to find, ready for whatever came next, my heart steady in the quiet. The morning was quiet, sunlight slipping through the blinds of the owner's suite, painting soft stripes across the walls, the air carrying the faint scent of polished wood and fresh linens. I'd settled into a routine here, waking early to walk the hotel's halls, checking on small details, a flickering light in the east wing, a guest's request for extra towels, a staffer's schedule shift. It wasn't grand work, but it felt like mine. Each task a thread in the tapestry Helen had woven, her legacy alive in the hum of the hotel. I sat at a small desk sipping black coffee, its bitterness sharp on my tongue, and opened a notebook, jotting down ideas for a scholarship fund in Helen's name. Something to help local kids chase their dreams, a way to give back what she'd given me. It was a start. A small seed planted in the soil of her vision. I stepped outside to the hotel's courtyard, where a few guests lingered over breakfast, their voices soft under the morning sun. A groundskeeper, Paul, waved me over, his hands rough from years of work, showing me a rosebush he'd planted for Helen years ago, its blooms vibrant even in the cool air. He told me how she'd stopped to admire it daily, her laughter bright as she clipped a flower for her desk. I touched a petal, its softness grounding me, and thanked him, my voice quiet but steady, his story a thread connecting me to her. These small connections, these stories were rebuilding me piece by piece, each one a step away from Nathan's shadow. Back inside, I met Maria in the staff lounge where she was sorting linens, her hands quick and sure, the air warm with the scent of detergent. She shared how Helen had given her a job when she was new to the city, scared and alone, her daughter just a toddler then. I listened, folding towels beside her, the fabric soft under my fingers, feeling the weight of Helen's legacy in every word, her kindness a ripple that reached me now. I promised to keep her office open, a place for staff to come with ideas or worries, a space she'd carved out for them. Maria's smile was small but real, and it warmed me, a reminder that I wasn't alone in this, that I was part of something larger. I returned to the suite, settling on the couch with a cup of tea, the city humming softly outside its rhythm, a quiet companion. I thought of Nathan, not with pain, but with a distant clarity, like looking at a faded photo, his face blurred by time. I'd been broken, but I was mending, not through grand gestures, but through these quiet moments, these choices to keep going, to build something new. I set the tea down, my hands, still my breath, even the past a shadow that no longer held me, the hotel's steady pulse, a promise I was ready to keep. One evening I walked to the hotel's rooftop terrace. The city spread out below like a map of quiet lights, each one a story I didn't need to know. I leaned against the railing, the cool metal steady under my hands, and thought about those first days after Nathan left, the way his betrayal had hollowed me out, left me raw and searching. But standing here, I saw how far I'd come, not by winning or proving him wrong, but by choosing to rebuild, to root myself in Helen's legacy, her strength now mine. I'd learned that strength isn't in holding on, but in letting go of pain, of shame, of the need to be seen by someone who never truly saw me. I'd forgiven myself for trusting Nathan, for believing in a love that wasn't real, for thinking I needed his validation to be whole. That forgiveness wasn't loud. It was a quiet shift, like turning a page, the paper soft under my fingers. The hotel chain. This community of staff and guests was my home now, a place where I could be Abigail, not just a wife who'd been left behind in a cold lobby. I started small traditions, weekly staff breakfasts with fresh pastries, a guest book for stories in the lobby, ways to keep Helen's spirit alive, her warmth woven into every choice. They weren't grand, but they were enough, stitching me back together thread by thread. I looked out at the skyline, the stars faint but steady above their light, a quiet promise. I didn't need Nathan's apologies or Veronica's defeat to move forward, to feel whole. I had the hotel's hum, Maria's laughter, Paul's roses, my own heart battered but whole, beating with a strength I'd earned. The lesson wasn't about winning or proving a point. It was about choosing yourself every day in the small, steady ways that build a life that make you enough. I was enough, and that was the truest thing I'd ever known, a truth Helen had always seen in me. What's a moment when you chose yourself over someone else's lies? Share it below. I'd love to hear your journey. If this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need it. Thank you for being here, for listening to my story. Here's to building our own light, one step at a time.